Hi, I'm Russ Etheridge. Before we start, I just wanted to give a big thank you to Maxon and all the guys organising the events, Peggy and Heather, Matthias, Dave, and anyone else I'm missing. I'm super happy and honoured to be asked to do this talk, so thank you very much. Also, just wanted to give a really quick shout out to Andre Hildebrandt for all his amazing help that he gave me last year, so thank you very much, Andre. A quick bit about who I am. I'm a freelance animator based in Brighton in the UK. Most of the work I do is for commercial use. That's like my main source of income. And I do a mixture of working for animation studios and production companies, but I also do a lot of my own direct-to-client work, like commissioned work and bits and bobs, and like anything that comes along, really. Lots of like interesting little things, like a lot of variety, which is good. In terms of my background and how I got into animation, and then of course using Cinema 4D, I actually started in high school, or secondary school as we call it over here. Me and a few friends were just like messing around in Flash, making like silly animations and like even the odd like really simple game, mainly just to make each other laugh. They weren't amazing or anything, but it definitely got me into it. That we were having like a lot of fun playing around with it, which is now called, should mention, it's now called Adobe Animate. I don't know, yeah, I mean all kids love animation, so but I think for me, like watching, because I grew up in the 90s, like we had things like Creature Comforts and Wallace and Gromit, like they're like it's made by Aardman, who are a massive UK animation like stop motion studio. And when these things came out, Wallace and Gromit, it's like, I mean, I don't know, you must have seen it because it's just like, it's huge and it's so well made. They were just like, they weren't just like the sort of regular kids cartoons that you see on TV. They were like something special, and they really felt special when you saw them. And also I think when Toy Story came out, it was just like another level basically. It just blew my mind. I was just like, wow, this is 3D. This is like a new type of animation. I mean, there were some kids shows that were made in 3D in the 90s, and when they came out, me and my brother were sitting there watching them like, wow, this is amazing, like some new kind of animation, and we were really excited because it's like we knew they were made on computers, but we didn't really know how it worked. So when Toy Story came out and took everything to the next level, I just really wanted to know how it was made, and I think that's kind of like what got me into looking more seriously at 3D in terms of using it for animation. Not that I was thinking like that at the time. I was only, I don't know how old I was, I was like 12 or something, but yeah, but then when I started getting into 3D, I was just like, oh wow, this is how that was made, kind of thing. So yeah. The first 3D software I actually used was called Bryce 3D. I mean, I don't even know if anyone out there will have heard of that, but I think it's still going, I'm not sure. But if you don't know what it is, it's basically, it's almost just like, I mean, the version I had, I don't know what it's like now, maybe it's evolved, but the one I had, it felt like MS Paint, but for 3D. So it's very simple and very user-friendly. And it kind of just taught me the basics. Like you could just like make cubes and spheres and stuff. You couldn't model in it, I don't think. You could make like these fractal landscapes and put skies and make nice renders of it and things like that. You can play with the materials, but it was really cool. But I don't know, it wasn't very flexible. So you couldn't, I think I definitely tried to make animation in it, but it's more for like rendering stills and like these landscapes. That was kind of like its thing. So, but anyway, after that I moved into like it gave me the 3D bug, and then I was asking around and a few friends, and some people were using 3D Studio Max. Like my brother's friend at some company was animating in that. So yeah, I started having a look at Max, and I actually used Max all through uni, and then I didn't start using Cinema 4D until I started working professionally. When I got my first animation job at it was at a big visual effects house in London, and it was like a motion graphics, the small motion graphics like studio inside a big visual effects house. So we were like 7 people, and we were like the motion department. This was in 2010. And I think that's like, I mean, it was probably starting before, I'm sure it was starting before, but it felt like people were really starting to take After Effects, the combination of After Effects and Cinema 4D, like seriously. And yeah, it was good, and we were sort of exploring that, and there was all these tutorials coming out online, and we started using it. So it was a really interesting time, and I think I got into Cinema 4D just at the right time, because it was just like going ballistic. It was really taking off, so it was good timing, to say the least. And yeah, when I made the switch from Max to C4D, I was like, wow, this is like, I mean, I know that Max is a great piece of software, but I think the way I use it and what I wanted to do, like to be able to do like a whole project in Cinema 4D from start to finish. Like Cinema 4D's got that usability. It's also got MoGraph, which is just like, it's insanely good how MoGraph is. It's really good. But Maxon aren't paying me for this, by the way. I just wanted to point out. So yeah, so I never look back, basically. So yeah, but I mean, actually, like, I think I would say that my love of 3D and my love of animation were kind of separate for a while, until I went to, just to step back a little bit, just to talk about uni. I did a master's in London at a university called the Royal College of Art, and I did their animation course, and I think that's where like I started taking animation a bit more seriously. It's not necessarily just about making nice stuff, but it's like it can be a really it can be like a really deep art form as well. And so yeah, that was definitely a massive eye-opener for me, that people are actually, like, serious artists are taking this seriously. So I mean, animation is still quite a niche thing, but for it to be to see it being taken that seriously was quite important, an important step for me. So yeah, that's like my background. I actually don't have a very current showreel at the moment, so instead I'm just going to share a couple of my favourite projects from recent years. The first one is called Olympops, which I directed while I was working full-time at a company called Animate, and it was like a studio initiated project. It was to promote the studio during the 2016 Olympics. So here we go. Cool. So actually, last year was a bit different for me. I was lucky enough to have a short film funded by the British Film Institute here in the UK. It's called Armstrong, and it's currently in festivals, but you can also check it out online if you search for it. If you search for it with my name, it's on Vimeo. It's already there. I mean, don't check it out now, but check it out like after I finish talking. So I just wanted to show you the trailer to give you an idea of what it's like. So check this out. Cool, so just to give you a quick outline of my talk today, I wanted to go through basically my full process from start to finish on a client job. and how I use Cinema 4D in that process. My approach to Cinema 4D is quite simple, like by design. It's to make it possible to do a project like this single-handedly or with a very small team. And that's why Cinema 4D is so good at this, like specifically. So I'll be touching on my technical process here and there. But look, there's a lot of amazing in-depth technical tutorials going on during these Maxon talks, and obviously there's like a lot of material online also that you can help yourself too. So I was actually hoping to give you something a little bit different maybe, and something a bit more broader and a bit more like personal to the way I work in particular. So I'm going to show you, there'll be like a tutorial of how I rig arms and legs. Like a very simple rig that works for my particular style, but it's still quite versatile. You'll see when I show you. So yeah, the project I wanted to focus on for this tutorial is an ident I did last year for MTV. They've been commissioning animators for a really long time to come up with interesting ways to reveal their logo, basically. They've been doing this for like 30 plus years at least, I don't know. So when they approached me, I was super excited because it means that my name was going to sit alongside some of the like biggest names of animation going back to the 80s. So yeah, I just couldn't wait to get started when it came in. Cool, so I'm going to show you the ident. This is what I made. So yeah, just to take you through the process of how it started. Sorry if I sound different. Through the magic of editing, I'm now doing this on a different day. Cooler day. So MTV got in touch, and the first thing they did was send me a brief. And this isn't like the most typical job. For example, the brief was very open. They sent me this table and told me to pick a colour and an emotion, and then I can come up with anything I want based on that. So that was really nice. I mean, most of the time I'll be getting briefs which would be either it would be for a specific use, or it needs to it's using existing artwork maybe, or I'll have a voiceover that I need to come up with the visuals for. But this was quite nice. It was kind of just representing an emotion using any idea I wanted. But so I chose energetic, and this is the color palette. It was this orange color palette. So then from there I went into the concepting phase of the project, and I always start in my sketchbook, and I sort of begin roughing out characters if it's a character piece, and then start sketching a series of ideas that I think would be fun and work well as shots. So you can see on this page I was really quickly coming up with some ideas. I actually was thinking of some other ideas for the other emotions, but nothing really popped out as much as this energetic one. Actually I started off thinking I was going to do the chef with sad cranky, but then switched over to energetic and decided it would be nice to work as a like an energetic chef. Yeah, so this is a bit more character development, working on these long bendy arms and this sort of side profile character style I've been working on. And then here I'm trying out shot ideas. So I was quite a nice method of constructing a story here was I could just sort of like make random shots and then pick my favorite ones, and then I can sequence them in the edit, because it was like clips of him doing lots of different things. So that was really nice. I didn't have to like really meticulously storyboard the sequence of shots. I could just make lots of different ones and then see how it worked in the edit afterwards. On the right hand side I'm choosing the final character head design and a couple of more sketches. Here's some more shot ideas. Unfortunately, I had loads of ideas, but I had to constrain it down to 30 seconds or whatever it was. Like, it was really short, so I had to really zip past, and a lot of my favourite ideas didn't make it in. I mean, I tried to put my favourite ones in, but it also had to kind of make sense. So then I've got some more vegetable shapes. So after the initial sketches and concepting, that's kind of for me. I wouldn't really share that with a client necessarily. And so this was the star frame I sent. I actually did a couple of colour variations, which I liked both of them, but I felt like this one used the colour palette in a better way. Yeah, I think I ended up going with this one. I think it worked a bit nicer. So I sent this and a written idea of generally what I was going to do. They gave me the thumbs up and said go, with no feedback, so it's a perfect situation. Cool, so let's jump into Cinema 4D, and I'll just show you quickly my star frame setup. Here we go. Apologies, but I don't have a Octane license on this machine. And I tried installing the demo, but it's not working, so we're going to have to look at it without colours, unfortunately. This was all rendered in Octane, and all the materials were Octane. You can kind of see previews at the bottom here what my materials were, but they're really simple. And actually, for the final thing, I hired a friend and colleague, Luke Doyle, who works at Moth. Luke came on for a couple of days to help me out with the final materials on the skin and all the food and stuff, and made things look really tasty. So I won't go into that too much because it's Octane and it's a plugin. It's not part of Cinema 4D itself. This I modelled specifically for the style frame. Here's my vegetables. They're just really simple box modelling. If I take off the subdivisions, how simple they are. So I literally just make these box shapes, and then it used to be called hypernerbs, but it's now called subdivision surface object, and that makes everything nice and smooth. It sort of rounds it off and adds more subdivisions. So the character is actually adapted from a character I made for my short film, which I can show you here. So it's the same rig, and I've replaced the head and changed a few things around. This leg setup was quite complicated, but I'll go through later how I achieved this, and give you an idea of how I do simple rigs for characters. I mean, this is actually not that simple. This is quite a complicated one, but it can be very simple, and I'll show you how I did this and why I made certain decisions. Basically, how to make an IK rig that keeps your knees really straight, like have these really sharp corners, which required a bit of problem solving, which I can show you later. Let's go back into here quickly. So I basically used the same rig, and I wanted to have these multiple joints on the arms. Came up with a new way of doing the mouth, which I was pretty happy with. So I'll quickly take you through my storyboarding. So after sending the concept and style frame to the client, I then go back, make sure I've got approval on that, and then I can start storyboarding. So here's a sample of my storyboard frames. This is where I'm drawing, basically making cleaner versions of what I did in my sketchbook earlier to illustrate to the client what's going to happen shot by shot throughout the animation. This is potentially the most important stage. This is where you actually make the film. I draw a sketch of each shot in sequence, and sometimes multiple frames to describe a more complicated movement. So you can see the top 3 frames are actually all one shot. So you have the small hat goes onto the guy's head, and you can see the arrows describing the action, and then we zoom out to see a full shot of him. And actually the next one as well is where he gets his knives out. Generally I find the more thorough you are with the storyboard, the better off you are when it comes to animation. I mean, it's never nice getting rid of your hard work because of rushed planning. So once the storyboard and the style frame and everything's been approved by the client, we need to start animation production. And the first thing you need to do when doing animation production in 3D, also if you're doing 2D rigs obviously, but is to start taking your designs of the character and rigging them so that they are ready for animation. So I'm going to take you into Cinema 4D here and I'm going to first show you this scene. So this is where the hands come in and it starts chopping apart the vegetables. So what I want to show you how I rig these arms. Even though I didn't do any walking or leg animation in this ident, I think it would be useful to show you how I rig IK with the same system. So I'll show you how I did the arms, which is pretty straightforward, and then I'll show you how I did these legs. So I'm going to start a new scene. First thing I'm going to do is change my perspective view to my front view, which you can do by pressing this button up here on the corner of the window. And then I'm going to go to my right view on this one by expanding it again with the same button. So this method is called a spline rig. So it's really straightforward, it's very quick and easy. So you make your spline. So let's do, let's say we're making a leg, because I'm going to show you more leg stuff later. So we can make our hip here, and make a knee, and that will be the ankle. I won't do the foot because, actually no, I will do the foot. We'll do the foot as well. And you can readjust this using the point selection tool here and your main selection tool to select the points and move them around. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to need is a sweep NURBS object. So let's create a sweep NURBS object by going up here and clicking on sweep. And you can see it pop up in your object manager on the right hand side. And then you drop your spline into the sweep NURBS, and then it doesn't do anything. So we need to tell Cinema 4D what shape we want to run along the spline. And I want it to be circular. So I'm going to make a circle object. So this is different to this is not a sphere, this is a spline circle object. So it comes in as this. It's the same thing as the spline, but it's actually one of Cinema 4D's kind of like parametric splines. So we don't need to convert it to a proper spline. But with this one, you just need to know you can't edit the points. You can only edit the object properties here, which is actually more useful for what we're doing. So you take your circle and you can adjust its radius here and make it roughly the radius of your trousers. So that's okay for me for the moment. I can drop it into the sweep NURBS, and the order of the objects inside the sweep NURBS is very important. So you can see here it's done something very strange, but orientations are wrong. So you click on the circle and you can select plane here down in the circle object properties. So you can, if we change it to maybe XY, that's it, perfect. So now if we go back to our perspective view, this is now our leg. It's quite fat, so I'm going to adjust that in a sec. If you switch to GUID shading with lines, you can see a bit clearer what's going on with the structure. Great, so I'm going to reduce this a little bit, reduce the radius. The great thing about this whole setup is that it's all live, so there's no flattening down to geometry of any of these objects. It's all live, so I can animate the full sequence. I can make my character run around, pick up things, do all kinds of crazy stuff, and I'm like, actually I want the trousers to be a bit thinner. You can do that very easily by just adjusting the radius of your circle, and it will update everything. So it's a very, very powerful method. Great. So I'm just going to rename these. So this is going to be my leg and my leg spline. The way I'm going to make this into a trouser and a foot is by using the start and end growth in the Spline object properties. So if you click on your Spline object, you get some options here, and you can adjust the growth, the endpoint of where the sweep NURB starts and ends along the spline. So you can see it's making a strange angle at the bottom here. You can fix that by clicking on your spline object and going to intermediate points and changing this to one of the other ones. I think subdivided is probably the best. And as you can see here, it's now keeping proper cross-section across the spline. And actually, because I don't actually need a curve in the knee, and you might want a curve in the knee, but I'm going to keep it all really sharp corners. I'm going to change the type of spline from a Bezier to linear, just to make it a bit less complicated later. So there we go. And so that's my trouser, and now I want to make my foot. So we're basically just going to make the same object again. I'm going to actually now I'm just going to make my scene a bit tidier. I'm going to make a null. Null is basically kind of what it sounds like. It's a non-object. It's a null object. So it's just point information, positional information with no geometry. So it won't come up in a render or anything like that. And I'm going to name this leg as well, and I'm going to drop my leg sweep NURBs, which I'm going to call this leg sweep. Call this leg sweep NURBs into the leg object, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate my leg sweep, and you can do that by holding Command or Control on a PC, and just dragging, and then when you let go, it will make a copy. This is a very quick, time-saving copy and paste feature of Cinema 4D. So I'm going to make sure that both these things are inside the leg null, which you can when you drag and drop them in. And I'm going to call this foot sweep. And I'm going to now adjust my sweep NURBs and my circle radius to create the bottom of this leg, the foot, which is normally at the bottom of your leg. So I'm going to increase the end growth again back up to 100% because I want it to go all the way to the end. And I'm actually going to change the start growth. Sorry, let me hide the trouser to make this a bit less confusing. So you can hide and show things with these, I don't know what you call them, on-off traffic lights. If you hold Alt, it will change both of them at the same time. Basically, the top one is whether it's visible in the viewport, and the bottom one is whether it's visible in the render. So we're just going to turn both of them off for the moment. So we're back to this full one for the foot, and I'm going to change my start growth just down here so we don't get any complications at the top where things are overlapping or something like that. So just to make it easy, I'm going to make it just below the knee, something like this. And I'm going to make the foot have a smaller radius than the trouser leg. We can turn our trouser leg back on now. And there we go. We have a leg, a fully fledged leg. So there's lots of other options you can change. I'm not going to go into them right now, but obviously you can do like caps, you can do rounding, you can do all kinds of different things on the sweep NURBs to give it any kind of look that you are looking for. But just to keep things super simple right now, that's all I'm going to show you. So now I'm going to show you how to rig the leg. Maybe I should have explained before, but I'm going to show you how to rig this leg in the same way I did the arms. So it's called FK, which is forward kinematics, which means each joint is following the previous joint. So when I rotate this joint will move, and when all of the ones that follow it will also move. So if I rotated the hip, the whole leg would move, and if I rotate the knee, everything below the knee would move. So that's called forward kinematics. What I'll show you later is called inverse kinematics, which is where you can move the hip and everything else, so the foot will stay in its correct position, and the knee will bend just based on hip movement. And then if you move the foot by itself up and down, the knee will move and the hip will stay the same. So it's kind of like the opposite of forward kinematics. I like to rig my arms. I mean, it's all use case, so it depends on how you're going to do what the character's doing in that particular moment, is depending on whether you want to use FK or IK. I like to rig my arms with FK quite often because it just gives you better control over the rotation of the arms and that kind of. You could use IK here, but I've got these really complicated joints where multiple joint things going on, so it was easy for me to just rotate all these different things in FK. In fact, these actually might be unrigged. Like maybe there's FK here and then this joint is completely disconnected from everything so that I can animate it independently. I think I might have done that on this, but let's carry on over here with the leg. Okay, so to set this up, I need to you see how I have both splines duplicated. I mean, this is not going to work if we're going to make this leg animatable, because you don't want to be doing duplicating animation for every single spline duplicate that you have. So what I'm going to do first is actually delete the foot spline. So let's get rid of that just by pressing backspace. And now I'm going to select my leg spline, and I'm going to go over here and I'm going to select an instance object. The buttons have moved and I'm still learning where all the new button positions. Here we go. So I'm going to select this instance object, and with my make sure the line that you want to make an instance of is selected, or any object that you want to make an instance of. So once that's selected, you select the instance object, and it will create an instance of the leg spline. You can see that it's put that into the reference object here in the instance object properties. So then now I drop the instanced spline into my foot sweep, and we're back to where we were. And now this time, if I move my leg spline, the foot spline follows. When you're getting into rigging, I think things get a lot more technical, so it's better to follow good practices of dependency, object dependency. So the way Cinema 4D works is it goes top down. So if you are referencing another object with an instance, it's better to have the reference object above the instance object in the object manager as things go from top to bottom. I'm not fully like by any means like know everything about Cinema 4D, and they might have changed it or something like that, but I do know that they do top-down processing, so it's better to be safe than sorry, because you can get very sorry later on when you're trying to unpick a technical issue. So the next thing we're going to do is set up this leg with some nulls so that we can control the leg with nulls. So with your leg spline selected, go to tags, and you go down to rigging tags and select IK spline. So just put a little IK spline icon next to your leg spline object. To set this up, make sure you've clicked on your IK spline tag. What we want to do is we want to drag our leg spline into the spline box. Click add, and then press create, and then add and create, and add and create, and that will create. Oh, sorry, we need to do one more because we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 points in our spline, so we need 4 controls. So do another add and create. So now we've got 4. Obviously, it's starting at 0, so it goes 0, 1, 2, 3. And you can see up here in the object manager, you can see that it's made 4 nulls for each point on our spline. And I would definitely recommend labeling these. So this is going to be our hip, this is going to be our knee, this is going to be our ankle, and this is going to be our toe. Great, so now when you move your knee null around, it's not working. So what we need to do is actually go into the IK spline. You need to give it an end, because this is expecting you to use this in maybe a slightly different way, but this is how I'm going to use it. It's expecting an end, which is kind of the end of your IK chain, but we just need to give it something. So I'm going to use the toe for end. And now when you move your knee around, yes, everything is working. Move our ankle around, yes, great. So I'm just going to go and double check things are aligned properly. So if you just go through each null, I noticed here that the toe is looking okay. The ankle, when you rotate, is at some funny angle. So I'm actually going to go into the coordinates for the ankle null and straighten that out. I'm just going to zero it all out like this. In fact, I don't really like the toe pointing that way, so I'm going to point it this way. My knee is looking okay. Maybe it would be better like this. Doesn't matter too much because I'm going to use FK for the moment. And then the hip, that's fine. Maybe just do it like this. Okay, as long as you've got one axis which is kind of pointing the same way, so they're all kind of aligned in the same way. So the hip, you can see that the red axis here, which is the P axis, pitch, you can see that the P axis is pointing that way on all of these now, which is good. Cool, so to set up an FK hierarchy, you just drop your hip, your knee into your hip, your ankle into your knee, and your toe into your ankle. So now we have this hierarchy running downwards. So when I move my hip, if I rotate the hip, the whole leg moves. When I rotate my knee, the foot moves, and the ankle, obviously the toe moves. So there we go, that's pretty much it. I mean, that rig is ready to go for certain situations. Like I was saying before, it's not the best setup for a leg. For a leg, you really need IK to help you, which I'll show you next. But for hands and arms and, you know, other things, potentially there'll be, like if the character has a tie, you can make a whole character like this. Like let's say you wanted to put a hand, so you would model a hand. Obviously this is not a hand, this is just a cube. You can put it into your toe null. Let's say this was a toe, a very big square toe. You now have your toe inside your toe null. Your toe is ready to go. So I'm just going to delete that for the moment. One quick side tip is if you want to see your controls a bit more visible, you can select all these control nulls. You can go to Object, Display, and I like to use the circle for these. So if you select Display the circle, because normally it would display nulls as points, so you can make these a bit bigger. And if you go to Basic, you can then go to Display Color On. Let's make this a fuchsia icon color. Here we go, display color. So now you can see your display color. See how it's changed it to fuchsia in the viewport and also in the object manager here. So you can just see them really easily. I like to sort of make maybe one leg would be one color like red, and then you have your second leg would be blue. Oh, sorry. Yeah, just one thing. So at the moment it's defaulted to the circles just facing the camera, which isn't most useful because I like to see kind of visually the angle. So you can choose a plane of axis here. So if you choose, say, maybe this one, X to Z, yeah, this would be quite useful. That's useful for the knee and the hip, but maybe not for that toe. In fact, the toe can just be off because we're not using that right now. So there we go. And then you can just click on them in the viewport as well, which is nice and easy. That's the very straightforward, simple FK rig for leg. So for the next part of this rigging tutorial, I'm going to show you how to change your FK rig into an IK rig in a very simple way. I mean, once you get into rigging, you'll realize you'll need this or you need that, or it won't work in your specific case. So this is just like a foundational tutorial to show you how to get things working. So like obviously by this point you've still got full control over your trouser width. You know, you can have really massive trousers or really skinny ones, and also your foot size. So this is still, like, even after you've animated all your nulls and everything's done, you can still change all this stuff, which is great. This is why I love this setup. Also, obviously this is like very cartoony. I mean, my animation is very cartoony, so it suits my stuff. I kind of work around the limitations of the look of this, so you might not be able to do this for your particular design, so you will have to do a more traditional skinning and weighting rig if that's the look you're going for. So we've got, if you click on your joint tool, so I've gone back to the side view, the right view. If you have your joint tool selected, then you hold down Command, or I think it's Control on Windows, Command on Mac. Then you can draw starting from the top of your rig. So let's start by the hip, and then you can just really roughly click where the hip is, where the knee is, and where the ankle is. That's all I'm going to do for the moment, because to keep this simple as possible, I want to just do this. So obviously you can add another joint for the toe here, or you know, if you've got toes on the end here, then maybe you won't have to go in and add a million little joints in there for all the toes. But just to keep it really simple, now I'm going to do just hip down to the ankle. I've made my joints in a bit of a crazy place, but yeah, if you have nothing selected, then it would have just made it in the root of the object manager, but because I had my circle selected, it made it inside there. So make sure it's outside. I'm just gonna put it at the top, like I said, top down. So I'm going to connect my nulls to the joints, essentially. So I want the nulls here to be following the joints, so because they're dependent on the joints should be above them in the object manager. But before that, we're going to make the IK. So at the moment all I've made is some joints, and it's the same as this. It's an FK hierarchy here, as you can see. But I want this to be IK, so once you've drawn your joints, click on your end joint and hold shift and click on your root, and this will select all of your joints in between, and go to character and go to create IK chain, and there we go. So now we have it's created an IK tag. It kind of looks like IK spline tag, but it's actually a different tag. And this gives you some options of how to control the IK in your joint chain. And it's also created a joint null, the end of like the IK goal null here. So it works immediately. So if you now move this null around, you can see it's now moving my knee joint correctly, and the hip is staying in the same place. If you move the root around, the joint will stay in the same place. So if you're making your character sort of crouch from the hip, this is where the hip would be, the knee will also move correctly. Cool, so that's basically it. And then the next step of this rig is, how do you get your geometry to follow these joints? And if you'd made a if you've modeled a character and you need to do weighting, it's called weighting, you would do character, and you can do binding, and there's weight tools, and then there's a weight manager here, and you have to go in and paint weights for the individual vertices. So it's a whole involved thing, which I'm not going to go into now because we're doing this spline rig method, but there's plenty of other rigging tutorials online. And so now we need to link our nulls to these joints. So I'm going to actually unparent these joints for the moment, because we don't want this hierarchy anymore. We want to follow this one. And I'm going to label these as well, so I'm going to just very quickly call this hip dot joint, and then I'm going to use another type of very common rigging tag. So if you go back to your rigging tags, you can select constraint tag, select PSR. What that stands for is position, scale, or rotation, and essentially it tells Cinema 4D to put this null exactly in the same place as the target, whatever your target is, and it will follow that wherever it goes. So I want it to follow my hip joint, so I'm going to put hip joint as the target. You see it's changed the orientation there. We might not want that. I mean, it's not going to matter for this rig because there's no, like I said before, there's no bends in my spline, so the rotation of these things don't matter. But I mean, you can switch it off, so let's just switch it off, otherwise it's confusing for our controllers. And actually we don't need those anymore either. We can turn those off, these the null display circles, because we won't be using these anymore. So I'll do that. In fact, let's just do that now. So let's select all of these and do display and put it back to dot. And we can also change in basic here, we can change this to icon color none, and it will just change them back to regular nulls. So we don't need those anymore. So then you just repeat the process for the knee, ankle, and let's just make new ones. So we go to rigging, constraint, PSR, drop my knee null in there, knee joint, sorry. This should be ankle, not toe. Sorry, I'm not an anatomy expert, I'm an animation expert. So yeah, there we go. And I've just realised that our toe is still not rigged, so we're going to have to keep the toe as FK, which is fine. You can do a perfectly nice walk cycle with just an FK toe. So I think this will work. What's the best way to do this? Yeah, I think I'm going to drop my toe into the ankle, and then we can turn rotation off. So go into the constraint for the ankle and turn rotation off. That way we're not stuck with the joints rotation, which will be some kind of automatic thing. We will have you know what, maybe, so that's working now by controlling ankle, but I'm going to change this. I'm going to move this into the goal. I'm going to move my toe into the joint goal. That would make more sense. I'll show you why. It's because then all your animation is controlled with the goal. So when you rotate the goal, the toe control moves. So when you move the goal around like this, it will work, and then the rotation of the goal will control the toe. And there you go. I think one final thing. Okay, there's a bit of an alignment issue there, which I won't go into now. But this is essentially everything you need. In fact, maybe I can just be able to fix this like this. This might be a bit weird. Zero that. Yeah, okay, so you can just zero that. That's fine. I'll position my toe so that it fits straight, and then drop it back in. And there we go. To finish off, I might just do a quick display change on the goal so that we can see that very clearly. So I think I'm going to go in here and change this to, so select my joint goal null, go to object, the object tab, and select cube, and make it a bit bigger. And again, we need to change the orientation, so something like that, that's fine. And now it's really visible, and I think I'm going to change the display color to fuchsia here again, so it's nice and visible. There we go. So let's hide all these, and now I've got my full rig. Let me just rename root to leg joints. And there's your leg. Another bit of tidying up is to maybe put all of this inside a null. So let's select all of that and call this leg. Obviously you'll be naming them right leg, right hip, right knee, left ankle, all that kind of stuff. Because you'll be duplicating them, you don't want everything named the same. And maybe this will be called ankle goal. If you can't tell, I like to be neat and tidy with my scenes, so it's always good to be neat and tidy. And there we go, so leg goes straight, and then it bends, and you can do a nice rotation on here, and it's all working nice and smoothly. So that's essentially it. That is how I rig my characters, and that's how I did the characters for my film Armstrong, and how I did the character here in the MTV ident. This is kind of the main technical tutorial section of my talk. Now I'm going to carry on with the process of taking this ident through to delivery. Great, so once you've finished your character rigs and set them all up for animation, the next step is to animate them. And I'm just going to show you this particular scene, the one I showed you before. I'm not going to show you me animating, but I'm just going to kind of take you through how it was animated and show you some of my keyframes. Everything is animated on 2s because I like to have a bit of a it sort of makes it feel a bit more stop motion-y, a bit more handmade, and also it's much quicker to animate on 2s than on 1s. You don't have to worry about all the in-between frames. You can get away with a lot of like really quick poppy movements with a lot of your animations. So, oh sorry, I should explain. So animating on 2s means you only the character only moves on every other frame. And if you were animating on 4s, it would be every 4th frame. Animating on 3s, it'd be every 3rd frame. Animating on 1s is like every frame, obviously. So that's what animating on 2s means, which is something that people often don't know when I talk about it. Yeah, so I mean, the hands are pretty straightforward. I mean, there's nothing going on with the fingers. They just sort of like come in and slam down. You can switch the layout to animation. I don't normally actually animate like this. I like to have 2 screens and have my timeline basically full screen on my second screen. So you can see here, I'm actually I've animated all of these arms on step frames, so you can see how all the keyframes here look rectangular. It's because they're all stepped, so I'm not actually animating in between. I'm literally just animating the pose, going to the next frame, changing the pose. Literally, like, this is how stop motion is animated. I'm not a stop motion animator. I'm actually fully digital. I'd love to try stop motion, but yeah, I've never done it. So you can see I'm just going through and deciding, okay, this frame, the pose of the hand is going to be like this, and the movement in this shot is very frenetic, so it's super quick. They just come in and they're just slamming around. You get it. You move the hand, saves the keyframe, and there you go. Simple. The difficult bit is all the animation techniques and making it look smooth, obviously. So that's hard. The actual like technical aspect of animating is not particularly difficult. And I'll also let me talk about this how I'm actually doing this chopping motion, because it's not always the most obvious thing, but a lot of the time you can get away with, like, I think when I first started, I'd be like, how are they doing these things cutting apart, and how do you do like a pen writing on ink onto a piece of paper, or how do you do, it's cheating, it's all cheating. Like, there is no, quite often, I mean, even if there was a real physical way of doing these things, like there is a real physical way that you can have an object and you can have another object slam into it and have it physically break apart using physics, but it's really like not the most useful way of doing it sometimes. Like, if I'm just having this and I just want to chop it into 2 pieces, like exactly, and I want it to land exactly like that, you've got to hand animate it. Like, there's no way to do this using physics, really. I mean, you can do it using physics, but it's, trust me, way more complicated. It seems like, oh, you just let the computer do it and it's really easy, but like those little randomness things that happen and the technical issues you'll encounter make it not worth it. So the way I did this is I switch it out for two separate objects. So on this frame I have a whole pepper, and then on this one frame, when the knife hits the pepper, it splits into two, and I have a whole pepper chop 1 and I have a whole pepper chop 2. Oh, in fact, it hits it multiple times, doesn't it? So I have a top piece and a bottom piece, and I literally animate. You can see down here my keyframes. It animates sliding away, so it just creates that little bit of impact, so it looks like it's just chopped, and the stem obviously flies away. And then when the hand comes back for another chop, it splits into 4. In fact, it splits into 8. Look at this. All hand animated. Top piece, bottom piece. It's just because I wanted it to be really controlled. I wanted it to be cut into exactly 4 equal slices. I mean, you don't even notice it because it's so quick. Obviously, like, how the hell is that same chop? It's the same exact chop. How is it going to split it into 4? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. But, you know, you don't really question that kind of stuff when you're watching things. It just makes sense, you know? It's cartoon world. It makes sense. In fact, for the cucumber, I did actually use physics, so it might have been a bit overkill. Like, I didn't necessarily need to do that. But if you watch the... sorry, my computer is just really struggling with the screen recording and the... and running Cinema 4D. But yeah, these pieces actually use a bit of dynamics to flop down on top of each other, because I wanted to get that feeling quite physical, so, and I didn't have time to animate it. So in certain situations it is easier to use dynamics, despite what I said 5 seconds ago. And all the other scenes in this short are animated in roughly the same way. Okay, so next section I'm going to talk about is actually called your whip. And what WIP stands for is work in progress. And working on client projects, you'll definitely need to send off multiple WIPs. I think on this one I potentially only sent off 1 or 2. And basically what it is like a halfway point, just to check in, to make sure everything's going correctly, and maybe get some feedback if make sure you're heading in the right direction, or if you're not hitting certain points, then this is the time to make sure that everything's going to plan. So what I'm going to show you is an example of one of the WIPs that I sent off to the client halfway through the project. Okay, so you can see there that I've got a lot of storyboard frames still in there. It's like things are only kind of half animated at the start. They don't have the full textures, or the rendering is not finished, and that kind of thing. So it's just to give the clients a good idea of where it's heading, and so on. So and also there I've got some temporary sound on there. I thought it was a good idea to set a tempo, so that I have something to animate to, and I can keep checking it against that. Okay, and then the next section I want to talk about is the sound. So the sound on the whip was something that I made, and that's just for me, and maybe like an initial version for the client. I don't always do that, but because this one is so quick and fast paced and the sound is so important, I wanted to get at least something in there. So, and the sound is normally the last part of the process. More often than not, sound happens right at the end. And actually, although like maybe sound on the full scale of things is potentially less work than the animation, because animation is like particularly time consuming, it easily adds up to like half of the whole experience for like the final piece. So it's really important to get good sound. And for this one I worked with my very close friend and long-term collaborator, Shervin from Mutant Jukebox. And the way we worked on this is he sent me multiple options. So I've got a couple here which I thought might be interesting to hear. So these are just like starting points that would go on to be refined later. The first one Chev named was called Yeehaw Cook. And the second one he called, I think you better sit down for this. Yes, quite appropriate names, I think. You can see there that these are actually what I'm sending Chev to work with is like time-locked animation. So it's not rendered. Doesn't look pretty or anything. These are just like previews out of the Cinema 4D viewport window. But it's all correct timing, and all the animation is pretty much there. That way, so he knows exactly how to set the time correctly. He knows where all the edits are going to be, and all the sound effects that if he's making sound effects at this point, he knows where they should be going, so they stay synced up. Great. So once your rigging's done and your animation is done and your all your whips have been approved and your sound is done, it's time to deliver the final thing. And so what normally happens at this process is you send off the final version and everything gets approved and everyone's happy and you have a massive party, and that's basically it. You know, in a perfect world. I'm only joking, that's not normally what happens. I mean, you know, most jobs, you know, you sort of, there's no surprises on delivery, and you just send it off and everyone's happy and it's all good. But you know, there can quite often be more issues to sort out, or maybe there's some different versions you need to do or whatever. But yeah, each job is different. So yeah, at this stage I'll just show you the final thing again, just to go over. So now that you've seen the whole process and how I made it and how I approach things, to see the final piece in context, I think would be useful. So I hope that gives you a bit of an idea about how I approach client projects and how I use Cinema 4D in that process. Thank you very much for listening. If you've made it all the way through to the end, you're amazing. Okay, once again, my name is Russ Etheridge, and if you want to check out my work or follow me on social media, I'm on Twitter and Instagram. My handle is @Russ_Ether, or you can check out my portfolio on my website, which is russetheridge.com. Thank you very much.